Fame was once the symbol of youth, of dreams, energy, and explosive dances on stage. But what audiences never saw was the heavy price some young actors paid for that spotlight. Addiction, broken marriages, and sudden heartbreaking deaths pulled them away from the screen, and from us forever. Join us as we uncover the stories behind the curtain and honor the legacies they left behind. Jean Anthony Ray as Leroy Johnson. Jean Anthony Ray played Leroy Johnson, the street-smart, explosive dancer in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when he was 20 years old. The role turned him into the face of the series. For a brief moment, Leroy and Jean seemed destined to rise together forever. Born on May 24, 1962, in Harlem, New York, he never married and kept his private life tightly guarded, even while Fame concerts and tours pushed him into global visibility. Behind that success, heavy drinking and drug use began to pull him away from work. He was eventually fired after his mother was jailed for running a drug ring, and he failed to show up on set. From that point on, every new job came with the shadow of his reputation. In 1996, he was diagnosed HIV positive but chose not to speak publicly about it, answering questions with jokes instead of honesty. As roles dried up, he moved between New York, Los Angeles, and even Milan, sometimes sleeping on friends' sofas or in parks while trying to start a dance school that quickly collapsed. Occasional appearances in projects like Out of Sync and Eddie could not repair the damage, and his health weakened as AIDS and years of addiction took their toll. On November 14, 2003, Jean Anthony Ray died in New York City at the age of 41 from complications of a June stroke combined with AIDS. His estate was modest, with an estimated net worth of about $500,000 from Fame royalties and scattered work. It was a small financial trace for a man whose talent had once carried an entire series. Albert Hague as Benjamin Shorofsky. Albert Hague played Benjamin Shorofsky, the stern, uncompromising music teacher in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when he was 62 years old. His character carried the weight of discipline and history into every scene. And behind that performance was a man shaped by shadows far deeper than television ever revealed. Born October 13, 1920, in Berlin, he carried a lifetime of displacement inside him. His marriage to actress and singer Renee Oren began in 1951 and endured nearly 5 decades, sustained by love, yet strained by the emotional scars he brought from fleeing Nazi Germany and hiding his identity in Hollywood. Their partnership produced cabaret shows, 2 children, and a rare creative unity, but beneath it lay years of anxiety about rejection, assimilation, and the fear that his past could still cost him everything. As the years passed, the pressures of aging in the industry tightened around him. After Fame, he struggled to find roles, often dismissed because of his German accent or his age, despite winning a Tony and composing classics like How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Illness added another blow. Renee died of lymphoma in 2000, leaving him hollowed by grief, and months later he faced his own cancer diagnosis. Sadly, Albert Hague died on November 12, 2001, at age 81, in Marina del Rey, California, after a painful battle with cancer. He passed just a year after losing the woman who had been his anchor, leaving behind 2 children and a legacy carried quietly through music royalties and a modest estate of about $1 million. Ann Nelson as Mrs. Berg. Ann Nelson played Mrs. Berg, the gentle but sharp-witted school secretary in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when she was 66 years old. Her warmth grounded the chaos around the young performers. Few knew that the role arrived at the very end of her long struggle to be seen in Hollywood. Born on May 27, 1916 in Los Angeles, she carried 2 marriages across her life, first to Stanley McDonald, then to Floyd Nelson, with whom she remained until her death. After raising 3 children, she returned to acting at an age when most actresses were told to disappear, facing the humiliation of being offered only comedic old lady roles no matter how serious her craft. That late start left her balancing recognition and regret, knowing her talent had finally found a home only after youth had faded. As work arrived slowly, she pushed through loneliness and the constant fear of becoming replaceable. Fame gave her visibility, and Airplane 2 showed her comic timing, yet she remained on the margins of an industry that rarely embraced older women. Finally, Ann Nelson died on June 2, 1992, in Los Angeles at age 76 from natural causes, leaving behind a modest estate of about $500,000. She passed in the same city where she had spent decades waiting for her moment, remembered by colleagues for the comfort she brought to sets. Morgan Stevens as David Reardon. Morgan Stevens played David Reardon, the intense, thoughtful drama teacher who pushed his students to confront their truth. In Fame, 1982 to 1984, when he was 31 years old. His quiet authority made Reardon unforgettable, even as his own life drifted toward a far lonelier path. Born October 16, 1951, in Knoxville, Tennessee, Calvin Morgan Stevens carried into Hollywood the weight of losing his father young and watching his mother struggle to rebuild a life for 3 children. He poured that longing into acting, but the industry never offered him stability. His career collapsed in 1989 after a wrongful DUI arrest led to a brutal beating by LAPD officers, leaving him with nerve damage, fractures, and trauma that shadowed him for years. The lawsuit settled privately, but what he lost professionally was never restored. Roles grew sparse, limited to scattered guest appearances in Melrose Place, Murder, She Wrote, and Walker, Texas Ranger. His personal life remained empty of marriage or long-term companionship, shaped instead by a deep desire for privacy and the emotional withdrawal that follows public humiliation. On January 25, 2024, at 72 years old, Stevens was found dead in his Los Angeles home after several days without contact. The cause was listed as natural, though those close to him described years of isolation and declining health. His ashes were scattered at sea, and his estimated $1.2 million net worth, built mostly from Fame residuals and earlier work, stood as one of the few remnants of a career that once promised so much more. Carrie Hamilton as Reggie Higgins. Carrie Hamilton played Reggie Higgins, the bright, impulsive, fiercely creative student, in Fame, 1985 to 1987, when she was 22 years old. Her energy lit up every scene she touched. But off-camera, she was already fighting battles that no script could soften. Born December 5, 1963, in New York City, she grew up as the daughter of television icon Carol Burnett, a legacy that felt both protective and suffocating. By her teens, she had already survived years of addiction and depression, clawing her way back to sobriety before turning 18. That early war left her vulnerable, and after Fame, she struggled under the weight of being seen as Carol Burnett's daughter, chasing roles while battling exhaustion and self-doubt that dimmed opportunities she longed for. Still, she pushed forward with raw honesty, giving her best work on Broadway in Blood Brothers and later in the national tour of Rent. Her marriage to musician Mark Templin in 1994 offered a brief calm before dissolving 4 years later, leaving her again alone with her work as her refuge. Acting sustained her spirit, but illness struck without mercy. A diagnosis of lung cancer that spread quickly to her brain, stripping away her strength far faster than she could prepare for. Tragically, Carrie Hamilton died on January 20, 2002, at just 38 years old. Her ashes laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park. Her estimated net worth of about $800,000, largely spent on treatment, reflected a career that never matched her potential but still touched those who saw her sincerity. Dick Miller as Lou Mackey. Dick Miller played Lou Mackey, the warm, sharp-tongued bartender in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when he was 56 years old. It became one of the rare, long-running roles in his 6-decade career. And behind that familiar face was a man who spent a lifetime fighting to be seen. Born December 25, 1928 in the Bronx, New York, Richard Miller carried the weight of being Hollywood's eternal character actor. His marriage to Frances Doak lasted from 1959 until her death in 2019, a partnership built through years of poverty, cramped apartments, and the uncertainty of whether acting would ever pay enough to survive. They never had children, relying solely on each other through the grind of auditions and the quiet ache of being overlooked. The industry adored him but never elevated him, trapping him in a cycle of financial strain and constant work just to stay afloat. Even with beloved roles like Murray Futterman in Gremlins, he remained the man audiences recognized but rarely named. As he aged, chronic pneumonia and heart troubles made each job harder to finish, yet he worked anyway. Sadly, Dick Miller died on January 30th, 2019, at age 90, after a heart attack while being treated for pneumonia in Toluca Lake, California. Frances had passed only weeks earlier, leaving him without the companion who had held his life together. His net worth, around $4 million from decades of steady supporting roles, reflected not luxury, but endurance. Debbie Allen as Lydia Grant. Debbie Allen played Lydia Grant, the tough, exacting dance teacher in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when she was 32 years old. Her warning about paying in sweat opened every episode. For millions of viewers, she became the spine and conscience of the show. Born on January 16, 1950, in Houston, Texas, her first marriage, to Win Wilford, ended in divorce in 1983 after 8 years marked by constant travel, rehearsal schedules, and the strain of a fast-rising career. The breakup arrived at the same time she was carrying the weight of fame, Broadway roles, and television work, forcing her to navigate heartbreak and professional pressure in the same breath. That mix of success and loss shaped the way she learned to live with both ambition and pain. In 1984, she married former NBA player Norm Nixon, building a new family while continuing to push forward as an actress, choreographer, and director. Raising children with a high-profile husband while leading shows like A Different World and later Grey's Anatomy meant long stretches of fatigue, responsibility, and very little rest. Over time, she leaned on dance, teaching, and mental focus to manage the stress rather than let it break her. Her life became a constant negotiation between the demands of home and the demands of an industry that rarely slows down. In 2025, Debbie Allen is 75 years old and still active as an executive producer and director on Grey's Anatomy while running the Debbie Allen Dance Academy in Los Angeles. Her estimated net worth of about $14 million comes from decades of steady work in television, theater, and education. She now spends much of her time mentoring young performers, trying to give them tools she had to develop the hard way. Carol Mayo Jenkins as Elizabeth Sherwood. Carol Mayo Jenkins played Elizabeth Sherwood, the strict, clear-eyed English teacher in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when she was 44 years old. Her calm authority contrasted beautifully with the show's chaos. For many fans, she became the heart of discipline the school depended on. Born November 24, 1938, in Knoxville, Tennessee, Jenkins spent years fighting gendered casting barriers that labeled her not glamorous enough, carving deep doubts into her confidence. Fame brought her an Emmy and restored her sense of worth, but it also reminded her how long she had waited to be taken seriously. As the 1980s closed, she chose the sanctuary of teaching over the exhaustion of chasing roles, pouring herself into guiding young actors while appearing occasionally in projects like Hollywood Wives. Stress pushed her off screen. Teaching became the steadier life she needed after decades of scrutiny. It was a way to stay in the craft without subjecting herself to the brutality of audition rooms. In 2025, Carol Mayo Jenkins is 87 years old, retired after 22 years of teaching at the University of Tennessee. She lives quietly in Knoxville, carrying an estimated net worth of about $2 million from a lifetime of stage work and academia. Her legacy now lives not in fame, but in the generations she taught. Erica Gimpel, as Coco Hernandez. Erica Gimpel played Coco Hernandez, the driven, fiercely talented performer in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when she was 18 years old. Her intensity defined the early seasons. But behind the confidence was a young woman carrying battles no script ever showed. Born June 25, 1964, in Manhattan, she spent her early career fighting the limits Hollywood placed on mixed-race actresses. Casting directors pushed her into the same strong black woman roles again and again, creating a quiet identity war that lingered long after Fame ended. The pressure hardened her, but it also exhausted her, leaving her navigating Fame with a sense of being both visible and unseen. Those years carved deep fatigue into her life, and she turned toward voice work, theater, and independent projects to escape the boxes the industry built around her. Through all of it, she never married publicly, choosing instead a life anchored in work, mentorship, and music. Her resilience kept her afloat even when the industry's expectations threatened to drown her sense of self. In 2025, at 61 years old, Erica Gimpel continues acting and singing with an estimated net worth of about $3 million. She works steadily in television and theater, carving out a career on her own terms. The girl who once fought for space in the Fame cafeteria now stands as a veteran who earned her place without ever compromising who she was. Lee Curreri as Bruno Martelli. Lee Curreri played Bruno Martelli, the intense young keyboard prodigy in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when he was 21 years old. His talent lit up the series. But once the cameras stopped, he faced a silence far louder than applause. Born January 4, 1961, in the Bronx, New York, Leonard Charles Curreri stepped into adulthood carrying expectations he never knew how to meet. His marriage to Sherry Dean brought stability through the years, though their life was marked by constant moves and the stress of rebuilding careers in new cities. Long before that, a failed earlier marriage left him questioning his worth just as Hollywood began to turn its back. When Fame ended, the spotlight vanished almost overnight, leaving him wrestling with identity, depression, and temporary alcohol dependence. He escaped Los Angeles for Portland, searching for a quieter life and a way back into music without the noise of being a former star. Slowly, he rebuilt himself, writing for Natalie Cole, producing albums, and shaping a quieter legacy away from Fame's demands. In 2025, at 64 years old, Lee Curreri lives in Portland, working in music and with an estimated net worth of about $2 million. He composes, produces, and creates at his own pace, far from the pressure that once nearly broke him. Valerie Lansberg, as Doris Schwartz. Valerie Lansberg played Doris Schwartz, the soulful, big-hearted singer in Fame, 1982 to 1987, when she was 24 years old. Her voice carried the emotional core of the series. Yet the spotlight that lifted her also exposed every insecurity she tried to hide. Born August 12, 1958 in New York City, Valerie spent years wrestling with the shift from singer-actor to director, facing rejection after rejection from studios that dismissed her as too inexperienced. The financial strain and the sting of being underestimated pushed her into periods of doubt that stayed with her long after she left the series. Her marriage to James McVeigh, beginning in 1984, lasted through decades of career swings before collapsing under the weight of diverging ambitions. Sobriety marked a turning point. She became sober the same year she left Fame, choosing clarity over the slow, unraveling alcohol once offered. Recovery brought discipline, directing brought purpose, and writing gave her a quiet refuge where the pressure to perform finally eased. But even as she built a career behind the camera, the shadow of her early fame followed her into every room. In 2025, at 67 years old, Valerie Lansberg works as a director and producer with an estimated net worth of about $1 million. She lives a quieter life now, grounded by her 2 children and the steady rhythm of creating instead of performing. P.R. Paul as Montgomery McNeil. P.R. Paul played Montgomery McNeil, the soft-spoken actor hiding deeper truths, in Fame, 1982, when he was 26 years old. His gentle presence made Montgomery unforgettable, but the role carried a weight that stayed with him long after the cameras stopped. Born July 28, 1956, in New York City, he stepped into the industry at a time when playing a gay character could end a career. The backlash was quiet but brutal. Fewer auditions, lingering whispers, and casting doors that closed without explanation. The pressure carved into him a sense of being marked by a role he once embraced with pride. Those years forced him to rebuild himself through music and scattered film appearances, holding on even when self-doubt crept into every decision. Yet he kept performing. Small roles, small stages, but always with sincerity. In 2025, at 69 years old, P.R. Paul continues making music with an estimated net worth of about $800,000. He performs, writes, and records quietly, far from the frenzy of early fame. Lori Singer as Julie Miller. Lori Singer played Julie Miller, the gifted but fragile cellist dancer, in Fame, 1982 to 1983, when she was 25 years old. Her character's vulnerability mirrored the pressure she already carried long before she stepped onto the set. Born November 6, 1957, in Corpus Christi, Texas, Lori grew up in a family where brilliance was expected, not praised. The weight of being the musical prodigy pushed her toward perfectionism that followed her through Juilliard and into Hollywood. After Footloose turned her into a star, that same pressure hardened into exhaustion, leaving her struggling to decide who she was when she wasn't performing. Her marriage to lawyer Richard Emery from 1980 to 1996 strained under that weight. 2 people moving in opposite rhythms, unable to hold the same note for long. Without children, and without the stability she once imagined, Lori retreated into music and documentary work, finding healing in creation rather than applause. In 2025, at 68 years old, Lori Singer works quietly as a documentary producer, with an estimated net worth of about $500,000. She lives between music studios and editing rooms, holding on to the parts of her craft untouched by fame. Antonia Franceschi as Hilary Van Doren. Antonia Franceschi played Hilary Van Doren, the elegant, disciplined ballet girl. In Fame, 1982 to 1983, when she was 22 years old. Her calm precision on screen concealed the storms she had already survived. Behind Hilary's poise was a dancer fighting for control of a life that never felt fully hers. Born March 30th, 1960 in New York, Antonia carried into Hollywood the physical and emotional scars of ballet training under George Balanchine, where pressure and perfectionism were daily battles. Injury struck her at the height of her career, forcing her to confront the end of her life as a ballerina long before she was ready. Retirement from dancing in 1990 pushed her toward choreography, a place where she could rebuild the pieces that ballet had fractured. Her work for Dr. Semmelweis, Starlight Express, and companies across the U.S. and U.K. restored her voice, earning her the Time Out Award for Outstanding Achievement. Through teaching at Juilliard and directing her own company, she found a way to transform past pain into movement. In 2025, at 65 years old, Franceschi lives between London and New York, choreographing and mentoring the next generation. Her estimated net worth of about $1 million reflects decades of creating rather than performing, a second life born from the body that once betrayed her. Nia Peoples as Nicole Chapman. Nia Peoples played Nicole Chapman, the driven, dazzling performer, in Fame, 1984 to 1987, when she was 23 years old. Her character radiated confidence, yet behind the scenes, Nia was fighting battles far harder than anything written in the scripts. Born December 10, 1961, in Hollywood, Nia grew up mixed race in an industry that insisted she fit into a single box. The pressure to be everything at once pushed her into cycles of addiction and self-destruction that followed her into adulthood. 4 marriages collapsed under the weight of fame, exhaustion, and the emotional wounds she carried, leaving her raising 2 children while trying to rebuild her life from the inside out. Her music career exploded with the #1 dance hit Trouble in 1988, but even success brought more scrutiny than stability. Bankruptcy in 2012 forced her to confront everything she had been running from, and writing The Little Apple Tree became her way back to herself. Acting roles in Walker, Texas Ranger, and Pretty Little Liars kept her visible, but healing, not fame, became her new measure of success. In 2025, Nia Peoples is 64 years old, working as a speaker, singer, and advocate for emotional resilience, with an estimated net worth of about $2 million. She lives quietly, sharing lessons carved from the chaos that once nearly destroyed her. Paige Hannah as Kate Riley. Paige Hannah played Kate Riley, the disciplined ballet student with a fragile core, in Fame, 1985 to 1987, when she was just 21 years old. Across nearly 50 episodes, she carried the quiet determination of a dancer fighting for space in a world that rarely made room for softness. Few viewers realized that behind her poised performance was a young woman wrestling with a far more personal battle. Born Patricia Alberta Hannah on April 13, 1964 in Chicago, she grew up in the long shadow of her famous older sister, Daryl Hannah. The constant comparisons chipped away at her confidence, and by her teens she faced cycles of self-doubt and depression that cost her several early career opportunities. Fame became both her breakthrough and her reckoning. Chronic back injuries from years of dance training later forced her to step back from acting, pushing her toward a quieter but more sustainable creative path. That transition led her into documentary work and philanthropy. Her cameo in Blade Runner remained a small but cherished credit, and her Young Artist Award nomination for Fame affirmed her individual talent. Off-screen, her marriage to producer Lou Adler in 1992 anchored her life amid the unpredictability of Hollywood. Raising 4 sons while navigating the pressure of being part of a high-profile artistic family tested her resilience, but she often described it as the first time the noise finally softened. As of 2025, Paige Hannah is 61 years old, living in Los Angeles and serving as chair of the Painted Turtle, a medical summer camp for children with life-threatening illnesses that she co-founded with her husband and Paul Newman. She no longer performs, but her influence endures through the lives she uplifts and the stories she helps protect. With an estimated net worth of $3 million, she has built a life defined not by fame, but by intention. So that's all videos today. Which story shocked you the most, and whose legacy do you think deserves to be remembered louder? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more untold Hollywood truths.